The quiet arrangement. The ones who do challenge it are underground, literally. ISV Cache and Mission Log, Antares System, Day 1922. Captain R. Maddox, Active Mission File. The ISV program had been sold to the public as humanity's great reaching out, the species extending its hand into the dark to say hello. We're here, we come in peace, please don't shoot us. The brochure, which Maddox had read approximately once before losing it somewhere between the pre-launch medical screening and the part where a doctor shone a light in his eye and said him, used phrases like cooperative exploration and civilizational dialogue and a new chapter in the human story. What the brochure did not mention, because brochures were optimistic documents produced by optimistic people, was that the universe was full of things that had not received the brochure. Maddox was thinking about this as he sat in the Cashin's observation bay with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago and a personal log entry that currently read, Day 19. We called the most powerful civilization we've ever encountered by a salad ingredient. Mission continues. He deleted it. He wrote it again. He deleted it again. You're brooding, said Yara Os from the doorway. Without looking up from the navigation tablet she was reviewing. I'm reflecting, Maddox said. There's a difference. Is there? Reflection is productive. Brooding is just reflection that gave up. He looked at the coffee. I called them lettuce, Yara. Ham called them lettuce. You repeated it. I repeated it to them. That's the part. He set the cup down. What do we know about the Antares system? Anything new from the relay? Yara sat down across from him, pulling up the data on her tablet and angling it so he could see. System confirmed inhabited, 2 populated bodies, primary planet Antara and a smaller secondary colony on the inner moon. Pre-contact civilization profile suggests mid-tier spacefaring capability. They have short-range system transit, no FTL on record. Population approximately 400 million on Antara, another 60 million on the moon. She paused. And there's something else. There's always something else. The long-range scan picked up infrastructure signatures that don't match the Antaresar's known technological level. She turned the tablet to face him. These relay structures, there are 7 of them in a geosynchronous ring around Antara. They're too regular, too large, and the material signature is. Maddox looked at the readout, then he looked at Yara. Tell me that doesn't look like what I think it looks like. If what you think it looks like is Lathium node tower relay architecture, Yara said, then yes, it looks exactly like what you think it looks like. Maddox sat with this for a moment. Great, he said. Wonderful. We narrowly avoided being a vegetable joke to the most advanced civilization in the known galaxy, and now we're flying directly into their backyard. He stood up, picked up the cold coffee, remembered it was cold, and put it back down. Get Ham. Get Sable. Get Cass if Cass is whatever Cass does. Mission briefing in 20 minutes. The Cashin's briefing room was not large. This was a diplomatic choice by the ISV program's designers. A small room meant people sat close together, which meant species that communicated at different ranges and with different physical comfort thresholds were forced into something approximating proximity. The theory was that discomfort generated conversation. The practice was that it mostly generated complaints. Ham Calloway arrived first, because Ham always arrived first to anything that promised to be interesting, and he arrived with 2 cups of coffee, because he'd apparently passed the observation bay and noticed Maddox's abandoned one. Hamish Ham Calloway was, by any reasonable metric, the most useful person aboard the Cashin and the most exhausting, often simultaneously. He was compact and broad-shouldered, with a red beard that had taken on a life of independent ambition and hands that could rebuild a drive coupling from raw components while maintaining a commentary on the fundamental unfairness of the universe. He had come up through the ISV program's engineering track out of Aberdeen, which meant he had opinions about everything, delivered them in an accent that required the translation matrix to flag for clarification approximately twice per conversation, and was constitutionally incapable of being intimidated by anything that hadn't personally broken one of his machines. "Heard we're heading into Lathium territory," he said, setting a coffee in front of Maddox with the energy of a man delivering evidence. "We don't know that for certain," Maddox said. "The relay towers are Lathian, Probably. And the Lathians are the ones you called a vegetable." "Ham." "Just establishing the narrative," Ham said, sitting down with the satisfaction of a man who had already decided how this meeting was going to go. Yara arrived next, already pulling up the full system scan on the briefing room display. Behind her, moving with the particular unhurried quality that Maddox had come to understand was not slowness, but a very deliberate form of observation, came Dr. Sable Vin. Sable was Varani, which meant that in a room full of humans, she looked like someone had accidentally included a painting. She was shorter than everyone except Ham, warm-complexioned with the wide amber eyes that caught light at angles human eyes didn't. She had come aboard the Cashin as part of the ISV program's cultural exchange component. The theory being that a Varani trade specialist with extensive first contact experience could provide context that no amount of pre-mission briefing could replicate. In practice, she had spent the first 2 weeks of the mission being baffled by human coffee consumption, amused by Ham's accent, and increasingly fond of Maddox in the way that people became fond of someone who was clearly trying very hard and occasionally falling magnificently short. She looked at the system's scan display and said, in her accented but precise galactic common, "Those are Lathian relay towers." "We're leaning toward probably," Maddox said. "No, those are Lathian relay towers." She sat down. "I have seen them from Varen's orbit. That exact configuration, 7 in geosynchronous arrangement, spaced at 51.4-degree intervals." She looked at him with her gemstone eyes. "The Antaresar system is in Lathium." Silence in the briefing room. Then, from the far corner, a sound like a low-frequency hum with a sharp click at the end. The translation device on Cass's collar rendered it, after a moment, as, "This explains the irregular energy readings at the system edge." Cass was Gasic Combine, which meant that describing their appearance required categories that human languages hadn't developed yet. They were roughly bipedal in the sense that they maintained a consistent vertical orientation, and their outer surface had a quality that human crew members privately described as like someone stretched dark water into a person shape and then forgot to finish. Their communication was electrical, pulses and discharges that the Carlo device translated into something approximating syntax, though the Gasic didn't really have syntax so much as they had emphasis at varying intensities. Cass had been assigned to the Cashin by the Gasic Combine's Observer program, which operated on a principle roughly translatable as we want to know what everyone else is doing without having to do it ourselves. Maddox had initially found Cass deeply unsettling and was now merely regularly unsettled, which felt like progress. "What irregular energy readings?" Yara said. "At the system edge. Something scanned us approximately 4 hours ago. The signature was consistent with what we observed from the Lathian vessel 2 days ago." A pause, rendered by the Carlo device as a slightly longer gap than usual. "They are aware we are here." "Of course they are," Ham said. "The Lettuce Empire knows everything." "Ham," Maddox said. "What they do. We're not calling them the Lettuce Empire." "I'm not calling them that officially," Ham said. "Unofficially, between us, in the privacy of this room." "Still no. It's accurate, though." Maddox pinched the bridge of his nose, which was something he had been doing more frequently since day 4 of the mission. "Okay, here's where we are. We're approaching a system that is, by Sable's assessment, under Lathian administrative control. Our mission is first contact with the Antaresar civilization, which the ISV program designated as a priority contact on the basis of their trading signals, and their apparently now somewhat ironic status as an independent civilization. So the question is, do we proceed? Silence. Then Sable said, I would proceed with caution. Caution how? The Lathians do not prevent contact with absorbed populations. They allow external relations, provided those relations do not challenge the arrangement. She paused. The key is not to challenge the arrangement. What counts as challenging the arrangement? She looked at him, acknowledging that there is one. They entered the Antaresar system on approach vector 3 days later, broadcasting the standard ISV first contact signal on the frequencies the program's pre-mission data had identified as most likely to be monitored. The response came within 6 hours. It was a visual transmission. The Antaresar had visual communication technology, which meant Maddox was suddenly looking at a face on the briefing room display, and the face was looking back at him. The Antaresar were, at first impression, a species built around a central contradiction. They were clearly warm-blooded, social creatures, with large forward-facing eyes of a deep, dark violet and features that arranged themselves in ways Maddox's brain read as broadly expressive. But everything about their posture, their stillness, the precise way the figure on the screen held themselves, suggested that expressiveness had been very carefully put away somewhere, and the key had gone missing. They were elegant. They were also, Maddox thought, deeply, architecturally afraid of something. The figure on the screen spoke. The translation matrix took 11 seconds. You are not from Lathium. You are new. We are, Maddox said, with the warmth that first contact protocols called for and that he actually felt. My name is Captain Wren Maddox. We come from a planet called Earth. We've been reaching out, trying to find neighbors. He paused. Good ones, ideally. A long silence from the figure on screen. Their eyes moved to something off display, back to Maddox, then away again. You should be careful about what you reach toward. The transmission ended. Yara looked at Maddox. Maddox looked at the blank screen. Ham, from the back of the room, said, Well, that's not ominous at all. They were granted landing clearance the following morning. A formal invitation from what the Antaresar government's transmission identified as the Coordinated Office for External Relations. The name had the texture, Sable quietly noted to Maddox as they suited up, of something that had been carefully designed to sound like it had always existed. The Lathians, Maddox said. The Lathians do not name things. They allow naming, provided the name does not conflict with Lathian structural requirements. She adjusted the clasp on her environmental suit. The Coordinated Office will give you access. They will be polite. They will tell you everything is functioning normally. And is it? She looked at him. Nothing about this is normal, but they will not say so. The landing site was a wide, open plaza in Antara's second city, not the capital, Maddox noted. The city was striking. Architecture that had started as something organic and curved, all the flowing stone and timber style that the Antaresar appeared to favor, and then had been interrupted. The interruptions were stark. 7 perfect node tower relay structures visible from the plaza, rising above the original skyline like punctuation marks in a language the city hadn't been written in. The Antaresar on the ground level moved around the relay towers, the way water moved around stone, naturally, automatically, as if the path they'd chosen had nothing to do with the obstacle. They don't look at the towers, Ham said quietly, standing beside Maddox on the landing ramp. No, Maddox agreed. Not one of them. I've been watching. I noticed. That's not just habit, that's trained. Administrator Verath welcomed them to Antara with formal precision. His voice was controlled, pleasant, and had the quality of something read from a prepared surface. We are honored by your visit, he said. Antara welcomes those who travel in the spirit of exchange. That's exactly the spirit we're in, Maddox said. We're explorers. We want to understand how things work out here, who's thriving, what you need, what you might want to share. Verath smiled. It was a precise smile, technically correct in every particular. We are fortunate, he said. The arrangement is functional. Glad to hear it, Maddox said, and smiled back and didn't push. The meeting lasted 4 hours and produced nothing. Not in the sense of failed negotiation. It was perfectly pleasant, technically comprehensive, and conveyed exactly zero information of actual use. When Maddox asked, carefully and without emphasis, who they had their current agreements with, Verath said that the agreements were complex and multifaceted, and that the office would be happy to provide documentation. The documentation arrived the following morning. It was 340 pages long. Cass, who apparently processed information at a speed that rendered reading speed irrelevant as a concept, went through all of it and reported. The word Lathium does not appear anywhere in the document. That's impressive, Ham said. 340 pages, not once. What word do they use? Yara asked. Administrative partner. 47 times. Maddox sat with this. He was sitting in the caisson, having returned for the night at the polite but clear suggestion of Verath, who had explained that the city's evening protocol made extended external visits inadvisable. Another phrase built around the shape of a thing without touching it. Sable, he said, tell me about Veren, about before the Lathians came. Sable was quiet for a moment, sitting with her knees folded under her in the Varani posture. That meant she was thinking about something she wasn't sure she wanted to say. We saw them coming, she said finally. We had a little time, enough to make a decision. She looked at her hands. We chose to negotiate before they arrived rather than after. That is why we still have a negotiation. She paused. The Antarisar, they did not have that time, I think. What happens when you don't have that time? The arrangement is made for you, she said, and then you live inside it. On the third day, Maddox was taken. This was not in the mission plan. He had gone out early, before the rest of the crew, with Yara's disapproving knowledge and explicit instruction to keep his communicator active, to walk the city, because Maddox had a theory that cities showed you what they actually were in the early morning before everyone remembered to perform their daily version of normal. Antara in the early morning was heartbreaking. Without the performance, without the careful not looking at the relay towers, without the practiced bearing, without the functional smiles, the city breathed differently. An old woman at a market stall handled fruit with a tenderness that had nothing to do with commerce. 2 children chased something small and fast down an alley, and their laughter was completely, defiantly unguarded. A man sat on a low wall looking up at the nearest relay tower with an expression that Maddox's translation matrix could not help with because translation matrices handled words, not faces, and some things didn't need words to be absolutely clear. He was 3 streets from the plaza when the hand closed on his arm. There were 4 of them. No weapons visible, which Maddox noted in the specific way he noted things when they were either very good or very bad. They were Antarisar, but they moved differently from anyone he'd seen in the official meetings. Looser, more urgent. One of them said something rapid and low, and the matrix in his ear caught about 60% of it, which included the words quickly and not here and what might have been forgive us, but. Forgive you, but, Maddox said. They moved him. It was efficient, which he respected even as he was somewhat against it. Down 2 alleys, through a door that looked like a wall until it wasn't, down a staircase that descended further than the street level should have allowed, into a space that was warm, actually, lit softly, full of people who were very carefully not making a lot of noise, and were all looking at him. The space was large, clearly long established, built into the infrastructure of the city in a way that suggested it predated the relay towers or had been very carefully arranged to be invisible to them. Maddox filed this under impressive and then filed it again under concerning. The person who stepped forward had her face doing exactly what her face wanted to do, which was, currently, a complex mixture of hope and skepticism, and the particular guardedness of someone who had been wrong to trust before and remembered it. Her name was Asha Vrel. "You are not aligned to Lathium," she said. It was not a question. "I'm aligned to Earth," Maddox said, "which is a planet, not lettuce." He paused. "Long story, unimportant." He looked around the room at the watching faces. "What is this?" "This," said Asha Vrel, "is the part of Antara that is still ours." They asked questions for 40 minutes before they let him ask any. He had expected this and sat through it with patience that surprised them. What they got instead was Maddox, who listened with his whole face and occasionally took notes on a small device that he showed them before using, and who answered every question with the directness that was his natural register. No, Earth was not aligned to Lathium. No, they had not known the Antaresar system was in Lathian administrative control before approaching. No, they had not been sent by the Lathians. Yes, they had encountered a Lathian vessel recently, briefly, in transit. No, they had not made any agreements. This last one produced a ripple in the room. Several people exchanged glances. Asha Vrel looked at him with a quality in her expression that he couldn't quite name. "You met a Lathian vessel and made no agreements," she said. "They didn't offer any. We mostly talked about the engagement they just had with an unknown attacker." He paused. "And about vegetables, but that was my fault." Asha stared at him for a moment with her full, unguarded expressiveness, deciding whether he was actually as strange as he appeared or whether it was a strategy. He wasn't a strategy. He was just Maddox. "You are unusual," she said finally. "Frequently," he agreed. "What's happening here, not the official version." "The real one." The real version was this. The Lathians had come to the Antaresar system 23 years ago. A census vessel first. The Antaresar had recorded it, not knowing what it was. Then the weight, with its logistical minds and its mineral survey equipment, and its complete, courteous indifference to the fact that anyone lived in this system at all. Then the coordinated office had appeared, not arrived. Asha stressed, appeared, and the arrangement had been presented as a thing that already existed, requiring only acknowledgement. The Antaresar government had acknowledged it. They didn't have another option that didn't end with the removal of everything that made option choosing possible in the first place. "What do they take?" Maddox asked. "Relite," Asha said. "From the moon's core. In quantities that," she paused. "Our engineers calculate that at the current extraction rate, the moon's structural integrity will decline within 60 years. Maddox was quiet. "The office told us the calculations are incorrect," Asha said. "They provided their own data. Our engineers are no longer permitted to publish independent geological assessments." "Of course they aren't," Ham said, through the communicator in Maddox's ear. He'd been quietly patching Ham in after the first 20 minutes, because Ham was terrible at many things but very good at catching what Maddox missed. "Cap, their moon." "I heard," Maddox said quietly. "They're eating their moon." "Ham. Is that not worth noting?" Maddox looked at Asha Vrel. "The people above ground," he said. "They don't seem terrorized. They seem," he searched for the word, "compliant." "Yes," she said. "What did the Lathians do?" Asha was quiet for a moment. "Nothing," she said. "They did nothing at all. They arrived, they built the towers, they established the office, they began extraction. When anyone objected formally, through the official channels, the objection was received, processed, and resolved through the administrative framework." She looked at him. The administrative framework always found that the objection was based on incomplete data and that the arrangement was operating within acceptable parameters. "So people stopped objecting." "People stopped using the official channels," she corrected. "Because the official channels do not lead anywhere that matters." Her voice was very level. "That is different from stopping." Maddox looked around the room, at the faces, worried, watchful, but present, fully present in the way that the people above ground had learned not to be. "And us," he said. "Why me specifically? Why bring me here?" Ashar looked at him for a long moment. Then she said it. "Because you are not from Lathium. Because you arrived without an agreement. Because you are the first thing from outside the arrangement that has entered this system in 23 years that is not already part of the arrangement." She leaned forward slightly. "We need to know if you are something we can reach toward." The room was very quiet. Maddox thought about his father, who had worked 22 years in a shipping yard and had talked about stars the way other people talked about places they'd visited once and never got back to, who had made sure his son got every tutorial, every simulation hour, every application filed on time, who had, when the ISV program acceptance letter came, sat at the kitchen table and cried in the particular silent way that men of a certain generation cried, which was to say without making a sound and with his face turned slightly away. He thought about what it was his father had actually been reaching toward, and whether it had been stars or something the stars were standing in for. "Yeah," Maddox said, "I think we might be." He was back at the Cashin by midday. Yara looked at him with an expression that suggested her patience window had been closing for the last 2 hours. "Well," she said. Maddox sat down. He looked at the display showing Antara below, with its 2 perfect relay towers and its careful citizens, and its deep, quiet resistance running underneath it all like a river that had learned to flow below the frost line. "The official government is a shell," he said. "Functional, polite, completely controlled. The actual population are," he paused, "doing what people do when the official options don't work. They're doing something unofficial." "And they want our help," Yara said. "They want to know if we're worth asking for help," Maddox said, "which is different. They're not naive." He looked at the display. "I said yes, provisionally. I said we'd come back." Silence. Then Sable said, quietly, "The Lathians will have registered your movement through the city this morning." "Probably." "And the location where you went?" "Probably not," Maddox said. "The space was built specifically to be invisible to the relay towers. They've had 23 years to get good at it." He paused. "But the movement, yes. They'll know I went off pattern." "So our relationship with the official government is now complicated," Yara said. "Our relationship with the official government," Maddox said, "was always complicated. We just weren't informed about the complications until now." He looked at his crew, Yara, careful and precise. Ham, frowning at the engineering console in the way that meant he was actually thinking hard about something else. Sable, whose amber eyes were calculating. Cass, still, watchful, conducting their perpetual low-level electrical observation of the room. "We have an official contact with a government that tells us everything is fine," Maddox said. "We have an unofficial contact with a resistance movement that has just told us the moon is being eaten. We have a Lathian relay tower network that almost certainly noted the anomaly in my movement pattern this morning. And we still have an original mission, which was first contact with an independent civilization. Except the civilization we were supposed to contact isn't independent and hasn't been for 23 years. He paused. "On the bright side," he said, "at least we didn't call anyone a vegetable this time." Ham looked up from the engineering console. "Not yet," he said. "Day's not over." That night, Maddox wrote 2 things. The first was the official mission log, first contact with Antaresar civilization established, relations with the Coordinated Office for External Relations initiated, further dialogue scheduled, mission status active. The second was the personal addendum. The Antaresar have been living inside a Lathian arrangement for 23 years. They have been very carefully shaped into a population that functions within the arrangement and does not challenge it. The ones who do challenge it are underground, literally, running a resistance operation that is impressive in its discipline and heartbreaking in what it reveals about how long they've been doing this alone. They asked us if we were something they could reach toward. I said yes. I hope I was right. The Lathians are watching. The official government is watching. The resistance is watching. And we are approximately one exploratory vessel with a Varani trade specialist, a Gasic observer, and an engineer who calls everything that goes wrong a wee catastrophe. We are also, at the moment, the only thing in this system that isn't already inside the arrangement. I think that might be enough to matter. For now, Maddox